Let's get some more thoughts about what's happening and bring to the picture investigative journalist Webster Tarpley joining me from Washington, D.C. Webster, hi there. Echoes, do you think,
Hello.
of the past here, Webster? The US has tried this before, hasn't it? Supplying weapons to rebels in Afghanistan back in the 80s. That didn't turn out so well. Those weapons, indeed, that expertise being used against them now. Do you think we could see a repeat in Libya?
I'm very much afraid that it is. We have a study from West Point, the United States Military Academy, dated December 2007, which would indicate that the band of territory from Benghazi over to Tobruk, going through the city of Darna, this is an area with one of the highest densities of Islamic terrorism anywhere in the world. If you're looking for jihadis, if you're looking for mujahideen, this seems to be the world capital, especially according to the U.S. government definition of terrorism. What happened was the U.S. forces back in 2007 captured the al-Qaeda personnel files in an area in Iraq near the Syrian border. And what they found was, in terms of terrorists per capita, Libya was by far the most active center for the recruitment of jihadis to go into Iraq and kill the U.S. and the NATO forces. Saudi Arabia sent more individual fighters, but in terms of population, Libya was the champion, but not all of Libya, especially this area of Benghazi and above all the city of Darna. Darna is a town of about 50 or 70,000 people, and they were the absolute world champion, #1 in the world in terms of sending terrorists into Iraq. And they were doing this, they beat Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, even though Riyadh is a city of 4 or 5 million people, and Darna is much smaller, again, 50 to 60,000 people by some estimates. It's so intense that in the city of Darna, you've got about 1,000 population. That's enough to send one terrorist fighter. So one terrorist per 1,000 or 1,500 population at the most. And this is not simply a study that indicates the sociological tendency towards al-Qaeda terrorism, because that's who this was. We have it now confirmed. If you look at the London Daily Telegraph this past Saturday, based on a report in Il Sole 24 Ore, the main business newspaper in Italy, they sent their correspondent to Darna and interviewed the commandant of the city, the rebel commander, and he's a guy called Hasidi, and he says, yes, I sent 25 fighters to go and kill the U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan, and he says he was there himself. He was captured near Peshawar. He may well have been an inmate of the Guantanamo Bay concentration camp. That part's not clear, but he is a former U.S. POW captured as a terrorist, and he is now commanding this amazing city of Darna, where you've got one terrorist fighter for every 1,000 or 1,500 of population. And this is the group that the U.S. regime, with Obama and Hillary Clinton and Cameron in Britain, are proposing to arm. They want to give them modern weapons. They want to give them a share of the 32 billion of Libyan assets that have been confiscated here, and they want them to have a share in the oil revenue. This is an absolute recipe for disaster. It's an exercise in insanity, and as you say, it shows they've learned absolutely nothing from the sad story of Afghanistan.
All right, Webster, taking absolutely everything you say there, what are your thoughts about what's going on the ground tonight? The opposition now, it seems, the last 24 hours, has become somewhat helpless. Even the Allied support doesn't help them to hold on to those positions. They made so many gains. We all heard about it in the last 48 hours before that. What's gone wrong? What's happening?
Well, the forces that are deployed by the CIA, because there's no other way to put it, are a very heterogeneous secret army, if you like. I see 4 components. One is you've got a tribal component, mainly delivered by the British. These are the Harabi and the Obeidat tribes. These are monarchists. They're not interested in democracy. These are the nostalgics for King Idris, the king who was installed by the British back in the 50s that Gaddafi overthrew. This is the majority of the rebel council. The CIA delivers 2 components. One is al-Qaeda, the CIA secret army, the CIA Arab Legion, and there's also something called the Libyan Salvation Front here in Northern Virginia, a group of politicians and others who have been kept on the U.S. payroll. The French, the DGSE, Direction Générale des Services Extérieurs, deliver a group of generals around a guy called Mesmari, who was successfully made to defect by the French. So those 4 components, two CIA, 1 British, 1 French. That creates this secret army. The U.S. is now so weak and so decrepit, if you will, we can't afford ground forces. We can afford air power and some naval power, but ground forces are too expensive.
So who's really in control of Libya's destiny? I mean, nearly 40 countries were deciding Libya's future in London on Tuesday. No one from Libya itself, from either side, was invited to that. So who is really in control of Libya's destiny?
Well, Libya right now is on its way to being divided into two parts, as Sudan has been, as Serbia has been, as Yemen is being divided. But the idea is that the al-Qaeda forces are, in a sense, the U.S. land army against Gaddafi. Now, Gaddafi is somebody who has been around for quite a while. He is a very autonomous, a very ornery kind of fiercely independent guy. He began kicking out the Western oil companies last autumn, and he has been bringing in, for example, Russian investments. He's talked about bringing in the Russian railways to build a coastal railway, and he was trying to get some effective anti-aircraft missiles in his talks with Prime Minister Putin a little while ago, something that would have stood him in good stead right now. Right now, it's going nowhere except towards chaos. If the U.S. air cover were withdrawn, Gaddafi would then reassert control over the country. If, however, that rebel army manages to get into the western areas, they will carry out a tribal vendetta, a massacre, a genocide, under the cover of an anti-genocide or pro-human rights, pro-civilians resolution from the United Nations. They're talking about arming those rebels, and the first thing those rebels will do is to go to Tripoli and conduct one of the greatest massacres of our time, and this has to be stopped. We don't have a lot of time.
There's one thing I want to ask you. I want you to look into your crystal ball. Where do you think this is going to go? Where are we going to be in a month's time? Will Gaddafi still be there holding on?
I think Gaddafi has shown great resourcefulness. I think it's likely that the inherent contradictions in the imperialist coalition will come to the fore. The Italians in particular are very unhappy because one of the goals of this entire thing is to push the Italians out of Libya and replace them with the French. And we've got Sarkozy seems to think he's Napoleon. He's really more like Napoleon III at this point. So it seems to me that this is going to fragment. You've also got the British-French Suez 1956 coalition coming in. Right now here in the United States, this question of is it an al-Qaeda force that you're supporting seems to be bubbling up towards the surface. That could be taken up, for example, by investigating committees in the House of Representatives or on cable television elsewhere that will make it politically very difficult to go down this road, especially the arming. Of course, they're already arming the rebels from Egypt, right? The CIA is sending in weapons with the help of the new Egyptian military junta.
We've got to leave it there. I know you could talk all night about this. You're a man that knows a lot about the subject, but thank you for now for being on RT. Always good to see you on the programme.